Constructing your life is about much more than just building a bank account. Each week, join real estate entrepreneur and mindset coach Austin Linney as he interviews guests who are constructing their dream lives and impacting the world around them on a daily basis. If you're an entrepreneur or wanting to start a business, or you just want to hear motivating stories of how others have overcome the odds, you are in the right place. And now for your host, Austin Linney.
Guys, welcome back to Construct Your Life. This is Austin Linney here, and I have the honor of having Mr. Elmore in the house. How are you doing, sir?
Doing great. Excited to be here.
Yeah, man. Thanks for coming in, and thank you, Monica, for making the introduction. So what I like to do with my guests is I like to let them tell their story where they want to start it, and we'll kind of go from there.
Okay. So just jump right in.
Jump right in wherever you want. We could start at 1 year old, or we could start at 30 or 26, wherever you want to start.
Absolutely. So I'll just give a brief summary of my background and upbringing. So I am the youngest. I have 5 siblings. They're all half. My parents, my family historically on both sides have struggled with substance abuse. And so my parents had to navigate that at a very early age and ended up having me. So I was brought into the world, and a couple of my siblings had already been in foster care for a while. And so I was basically thrown into that life as well, very early, spending time in foster care as early as 5 months. Just looking back at my files and things like that, I first entered foster care at 5 months old. Spent a lot of my youth, early childhood years bouncing back home with my parents in foster care in all these different places. Then at around 5 years old, I ended up my mom ended up losing or giving up her parental rights for me. And that just put me into the system even deeper, made it harder for me to get out of the foster care system, made it harder for my dad to get me back. They divorced and split, and they both still had their own journeys and battles and demons they were fighting. And so I spent most of my childhood in foster care. I was in foster care until I was 12 years old. I ended up experiencing abuse, homelessness, neglect, all things that I didn't experience at home when I was with my parents. I was exposed to while I was in foster care. And so that just had a dramatic and drastic impact on how I viewed relationships, how I viewed caregivers and guardians and adults and authority and things like that. And so that shaped my worldview. And at a very early age, I made a decision that if anything good was going to happen for me, it was going to be on my own. It would be my own doing. And it would come from commitment that I made to myself, and that I was going to, like, that was the only way. I had seen nothing different. I had never felt like there was anyone else that was willing to stick their neck out for me, or willing to go out of their way to see that I was doing well, or that I was successful, or I was happy, or I was good. There was just time and time again, I felt betrayed and let down by people that I put my trust in. And so that carried on even when I got back with my dad. My dad ended up getting me out of foster care when I was 12 years old, going into 7th grade, so almost 13. But what that did is we struggled financially. We didn't have any financial security. My dad worked minimum wage jobs and really couldn't keep them. He was struggled with paying child support, for which this is a small tangent, but he was paying child support for me to my mom, who didn't have parental rights, who didn't have custody of me, and since I was 5 years old. And so he ended up having back due child support, which they took his license, which meant he couldn't get to work, which means we struggled more. And so my dad, who had been clean for a long period of time, ended up falling back into substance abuse. My dad's a veteran. He suffers from depression and a lot of other issues that come from that. And so he stopped taking his medicine and everything. And it just, this new like safe space, this new safe haven became like war between me and my dad, really, because I'm a 13-year-old boy now. I'm going through all the things that 13-year-olds go through and thinking that they're stronger or tougher than their dad. And my dad just didn't have the mental capacity to deal with it. And so we fought a lot. We got into it a lot. And then I started to get involved with gangs and people in my community, because if you weren't if you were in that environment, but you weren't associated with anyone, you were a target. You were, you were vulnerable, and physical vulnerability, emotional vulnerability. That was something I was like, that's what weak people do. And so I'm not weak. What I went through has made me not weak. I'm not going to succumb to that. And so, my dad saw that I was getting involved with the wrong people, and he, just didn't want that for me. Granted everything, I was a really good student. I was a well-mannered kid. I enjoyed athletics. I was intellectually, I would say I was different. Like, even as an athlete, things that set me apart was my mindset, was my mental ability to adjust or to work through problems really quickly. And so that helped me in the classroom, that helped me in relationships, and that helped me on the competitive field. And so my dad didn't want that for me. My dad, so he's like, basically summer going into my 8th grade year, he basically got me a bus ticket, shipped me off to, we were living in Illinois at the time, shipped me off to Wisconsin to be with my older brother, who he's 18 years older than I am, had kids of his own. And so he shipped me off there for the summer. And for the first time in my life, I was able to be a kid. I was able to go to the park and play games and not worry about like violence, not worry about being hungry or not knowing where I was going to sleep that night, whether I experienced that with my dad or in foster care. All those things weren't real anymore. They weren't there. I didn't hear sirens when I was going to sleep. All those things weren't an experience that I had anymore. And I loved it. Like, just like literally like having candy for the first time kind of an approach. Like, absolutely couldn't get enough of it. And for the first time too, like, I didn't know my brother was 18 years older than I was, and me being in foster care, we didn't have, like, I met him that time that my dad sent me up there for the summer. That was the first time I met him. But him being an older sibling, like, he treated me like an adult. Like, I wasn't just this 14-year-old kid that was like his son's friend. Like, no, he treated me like his brother. And so I was able to be a kid, but also be respected, which is something that I had never seen go hand in hand. So when I was a kid and I was supposed to be in a kid's place, I didn't have a voice. I didn't have a say. I didn't have any power or agency in anything that happened to me. And so now I'm experiencing this for the first time, and it was game changing. So I asked my dad at the end of the summer, Dad, can we move up there, or can we move up here? And he was like, no, son, can't make it happen. There's too much like here. You have to come back in a couple of days. Right before I was leaving to get on my bus to go back, my dad called and he was like, I just packed up the house. I'm on my way. And so literally over a weekend, moved our entire home, gave away furniture, like canceled the lease, got out of everything, moved up in our little like 1994 Oldsmobile, drove it up with all of our stuff, and we moved to Wisconsin on a whim. And my dad made a decision in that moment. He was like, this is what's best for your future. There's better schools, better opportunity. We'll be able to figure it out. It wasn't that simple, or it wasn't that easy. We went from a inner city, diverse environment to rural Wisconsin, which was a big culture shock for me, let alone my Black father who was born in the 60s, right? His experience is completely different, having to be a minority. Like, he had never really experienced being a minority, meaning rarely is he the only Black person in the room. Rarely does he have to navigate that. And so it was really hard for him. Being with my brother didn't help my dad's substance abuse issues. And so that spiraled, and we continued to get into it. We ended up getting put out. We ended up losing our home, my brother, my dad, and myself. And I lived half of my 8th grade year homeless. We were couch hopping, living in our Ford Explorer, my brother's Ford Explorer, staying in hotels. And I did half a school year like that without anyone knowing, because the fear in me was like, if someone finds out, I'm going back into foster care. And so did that. And then my dad at the end of the year was like, all right, we got to move back. It's not working out. Then I had played on a traveling basketball team, and there was a town that was closer that I made some relationships in, and they ended up helping me and my dad find a place, helped my dad find a job, and we started to get on our feet. Fast forward a couple years, my sophomore year in high school, things are going really well. We're doing well financially. I'm 16. I'm starter for football and basketball varsity. I'm having a lot of success in school, in sports. And then my dad got arrested. He got mixed up with some not so good people that tried to take advantage of him, and kind of they did take advantage of him. And my dad got arrested, and I was going to go back into foster care. And in order to not do that, I made the decision I was going to drop out of school. I was going to get my GED. I was going to basically become an adult at 16. I was like, there's no way I'm letting any of this happen to me. I'm not going back in I'd seen what foster care did to teenagers, right? Mm-hmm. Like, I was being abused as a 6-year-old, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11-year-old. Like, I saw how bad it got with kids who were teenagers. I saw how, like, even people outside the home just didn't care about them anymore and didn't invest any time, and I was like, there's no way I'm like subjecting myself to that. And so I was about to walk out of school and drop out, and basically said to myself, no one here will ever hear from or see me again. And my high school football coach kind of chased me down, and he told me that he wanted me to come live with him. And so I reluctantly, through many conversations, I ended up moving in with my high school football coach. Moved in with him and his family. He had 2 kids that I was actually friends with that were a year older than I was, but really gave me structure and stability that I hadn't had, and kind of they were able to cast vision for me in a much more profound way than anyone else that I had come into contact with. Because they lived in that space, right? Being a high school football coach, you help kids get recruited. You know what it takes to play at certain levels. You've seen that. Either you've coached it or you coached against it. And for the first time, he was able to speak into my situation and let me know what I was really capable of as an athlete. Whereas, like, I thought I was good. I thought I'd have opportunities, but I didn't know at what level. It's hard to see outside of your own worldview, right? I've heard, and I commonly refer to it as, is it's hard to read the label from inside the jar, right? So it's hard to know what ingredients, what contents, what's inside the jar from that perspective. And so people outwardly need to be able to speak into that. And my coach was able to do that and equip me in a profound way that led me to being a national recruit for football and basketball. I could have played either in school if I wanted to. Ultimately, I decided to play football for the University of Minnesota, which was like my first scholarship offer. And I decided to go there because it was so close to where my high school town was, the people that had invested into me. And I loved that proximity. I loved the coaching staff at Minnesota. And just a lot of people asked me, why would I go there? It wasn't a super popular decision. It's a lot better now, but it wasn't super popular at that time because I could have went to Alabama. I could have went to Oregon. I could have went to Ohio State and all these other big schools. But it was way more than just football for me. And so I went to play football at the University of Minnesota, had some success, played for the first 3 years of my career, ended up getting my degree in 3 years, graduated at the end of my junior year with a degree in communications, transferred to East Carolina and North Carolina to play my last year and start grad school, and played 1 year there, and then got a shot to play in the NFL. And I did, and I enjoyed it. But for so long in my life, I had built up like this, the NFL is this thing that was going to solve all my problems and take away all my baggage. And it was going to do all these things for me. And I got there and it was just like, there's money, but it's still the same game that wasn't going to save me from all my issues and troubles in the past. And so I put a lot of weight on the game of football that wasn't going to like fix me. It wasn't going to heal me. It wasn't going to do any of those things. And so, I don't know how early life crisis of like, not a midlife, not a like late life crisis, early life crisis of what do I want to do with my life and what kind of impact do I want to have if I'm gone tomorrow? What am I doing today that's going to leave an impact for other people? And so ended up retiring from football as a rookie, and immediately went back to the Twin Cities area where I went to school and started to give back, started to work with youth, started to really find what other gifts I had outside of sports and what other passions I had, and started to find like my way in the nonprofit space, like giving back to people and communities that struggled in the same way that I did. And in that found my voice and really discovered my passion for speaking specifically in the foster care space, and trying to help people revise the way they view, the way they value and respond to adversity, right? Adversity was the only constant and common theme in my life. And I had worked with youth when I stepped into my like professional career or my nonprofit career. And they had similar stories to me, but they didn't have the same perspective, or they didn't have the same drive, which again, we are all different. We're not monoliths, but when I was going through what I went through, I looked at the hard things that I went through, like the abuse, the foster care, not having like close relationships, moving all the time, all that stuff, as a reason why I needed to apply myself in school, as a reason why I needed to be the best athlete that I could be, as a reason why that I needed to do all these things. And there's these kids that were super talented that I really appreciated and got to know, that they looked at it as the opposite. It was like, because my life's hard, I'm not going to try in school. Because my life's hard, I'm not going to like show up. Because my life's hard, I'm not going to do all these things. And I just like spent time with them. Like, why are you looking at it this way? And so I ended up working with this school district to put together a curriculum for adversity, for resilience, basically, which resilience is the skill that comes from experiencing adversity. And I did some research on adversity itself. And what I came across was the Latin root of adversity. The English word adversity is advertere, and advertere literally means to turn toward. And so something that the definition of adversity in our language is something that is difficult or misfortunate. Well, the Latin root, the definition of that is to turn toward. So those two things are opposites. If I'm just going to view this adverse thing as something that's difficult or misfortunate, like the tendency of people is not to embrace or to turn toward something that's difficult or hard. So I started came to the realization that day, like, there's two kinds of people, and there's people that either turn toward adversity or run from it and just let it do what it does. Mm-hmm. And I walked out of like creating that curriculum of like, man, how does this show up in the foster care space? How does this show up in the same communities that I was a part of that I wish someone would have helped me figure out sooner? And I left those conversations, those thoughts, those brainstorming sessions of like, this is what I want to do. I want to use my story, the tough things that I went through, to speak life, encourage, inspire, but challenge people to challenge other people, specifically that work with youth that experience hard and traumatic things. I want to encourage, inspire, and motivate and challenge them to embrace the adversity of what they're going through for the benefit of the people or the youth that are going through it. So if we can't help people turn toward the adversity they're facing, they're not going to realize the potential that they actually have. Like, if bad things keep happening to me and I start to just accept that I'm a bad person and so these bad things happen, I'm never going to get my mind moving in a way that's going to allow me to achieve the things that I'm capable of achieving. And so it's easy for that idea or that thought to be lost on us. And so, yeah, that's what my passion is. That's what I want to do, specifically in the foster care space, but also with any like professional that may come across a kid who experiences that. So a teacher, I work with like child psychologists, I work with counselors, law enforcement, pediatricians, like all of the above. Like, how can we utilize the experience of the people that have come before us to make the experience of those coming after better? And so that's my life story. That's the skipping over as many parts as I can and ending us up here now, current day, Gaelin, sitting here talking to you right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so powerful. The hardest part in that whole story is that it's really easy to be the victim, right? And I think it's, I went through addiction and homelessness and alcoholism. I think it's the actual crutch of America right now is the victimhood, and how does one not become a victim in all the things that you've done, that happened to you?
Yeah. And I yes, I totally agree. And I think for me, it was this realization I had early on that people don't care. Like, just because you're a victim doesn't mean it's going to stop happening. Right. Like, just because, like, even if you have this victim complex or this victim mindset or mentality, if anything, that's going to predispose you to more adversity, to more difficult and hard things. And so, like, to me, I associated being a victim to someone that was weak, someone that was vulnerable. And again, in the context of vulnerable being a deer, like, or a baby antelope that's about to be attacked by a lion, right? Mm-hmm. That kind of vulnerable, not vulnerability and being open and being willing to like engage and like deal with your emotions. Like, that has I've transformed my thought on that. But being weak and vulnerable and a target, like that, the victim, that victim mindset is not going to like prevent that from continuing to happen. And so, I don't know. I looked at my parents. I looked at the people around me, and I just knew, I was like, even at an early age, I knew, I was like, I don't want this for myself. Like, I don't want that. I don't. Mm-hmm. And so I think one thing about being a victim is that you don't have hope, right? Like, if you're a victim, you're not thinking about the future and what could be next. And for me, that hope and future was the only thing that kept me going. It was the only thing that I had. And so even as a 6-year-old being abused by this foster parent, and everyone going to school or going to meet my social workers and everyone telling me like, oh, it's such a great home, right? Of like, oh, you just need to act nice, or you just need to be better, or all these things, right? All I could think about in those moments is like, man, I can't wait till I have my own kids. Yeah. I can't wait until I'm able to make decisions for myself. Like, mm-hmm. And so that hope for the future, for having some sort of power, some sort of agency, is like, that's the antithesis of being a victim. You're powerless, you're hopeless. You don't have anything to look forward to. Mm-hmm. And so I think, to no fault of anyone, like no fault of their own, people who are victims have had that hope, have had that power snatched from them in some way, shape, or form. Right. And so that is exactly what I want to do. I want to like empower and equip professionals or people that get it, adults that aren't operating as victims, to give the power back to the youth that they're working with, to allow them not to become victims, because it's going to take someone from outside of the jar to let them know that, hey, you're not a victim when these things happen to you. Mm-hmm. And so that if you were to summarize what I do, is like, I'm in the business of giving people back their power. I'm in the business of giving people hope for their future. And so like, those are the things that I view being different between a victim and someone who's taking control of their future, and really what mindset set me apart and allowed me not to think about it in that way. And I will say this, the one time that I felt myself go into victim mode was when my dad got arrested when I was a sophomore. Like they told me that at school, and I walked out of the school or out of the office, and I broke down and started weeping in the middle of the hallway because I felt the weight of like, I can't do this anymore. Like I had done this for so long and things finally, and I was like, I just can't catch a break. And so I was ready to give up. And my high school football coach stepped in and allowed me to not become a victim. And so you're going to encounter really strong people, but really strong people don't make it on their own forever, right? You need somebody that's going to be able to give that power back to you, to give you that perspective that allows you to keep going forward.
Well, I think what's interesting is I think a lot of people look around and they say, like, oh, somebody needs to step up, somebody needs to do this, change that. Yeah. But like, you probably need to look in the mirror and know that you could be the change. Like if you think that it needs to be done. And so like, meaning that if you go out and you affect 10 people in your local community, they're going to affect 10 people. I call it the ripple effect of impact, and so it doesn't need to be this grandioso thing, because I had teachers in my life, I remember from kindergarten, that it's that one person that steps you up. And, one of my favorite people in the world says that when she got divorced, she didn't love herself enough to change, but she borrowed the belief that others had in her long enough till she believed it in herself. Yeah. And I think, there are people that see something greater in you. And like, if you go out and you affect one person, the problem, and I wasn't in it. But my girlfriend was. The problem with those systems is once you get in the system, it's very hard to get out of the system. And so at the end of the day, it's going to take people, really RUR is a shining example of the other side. Right. And if somebody can attach themselves to see he made it, well, then that's maybe all they need to get them through that hard time.
Yeah. And that's why I focus on the people that work within the system, not just the youth that are in it. Right. Because I'm not going to be able to be known or impact every single kid in foster care. But if I'm able to like do trainings or have conversations and impact the social workers, like that's the multiplication, right? That's the ripple, is like getting to them. We know they're overworked. They could have as many as 10, 15 kids that they operate with in any given moment. And so, it's definitely like, what can you do? But also it's like, people very easily think about making an impact as something that has to be tangibly seen, right? It's making an impact is not just this thing you do, it's a way of living. And if you are living with the values and the approach that I am living to make an impact that is going to help other people, that's what you're going to do. Whether you're going to the grocery store, whether you're on your podcast, whether you're mentoring someone else, if that is how you live your life, it's going to happen. And each and every one of those moments, you're not going to see the growth of the seed that you might have planted. But that's not what we're in it for. We're in it to plant seeds or to cultivate seeds that other people have planted. Like your friend, you said about your friend, like she was able to see herself in the light that other people saw her in. So people were planting seeds, and all she was able to do was to rely on the seeds that other people were planting. And so too often people just associate like making an impact and doing these things with actions and then an immediate return on our investment. No. And it's a way of living. So in everything you do, try to make an impact. And as you do that, sometimes you're going to be blessed enough to see the return on the investment you just made. And that's going to give you enough motivation and fuel in your gas tank to keep going and do it again. But don't attach your commitment to make an impact to you seeing the return on that investment. That's not what we're trying to do.
No. And 90% of the time, like a podcast that you drop, let's say a year ago, or a YouTube video, right? that person might, and that's why I tell people about books all the time, that person might listen to that podcast 6 times or 4 years from now, and
absolutely,
boom, and then it hits them, right? And so like the book that you read today, you're going to be a different person 6 months from now, might sound completely different, right?
Absolutely.
And so you just, like you said, it's perfect description. Lifestyle. It's a lifestyle of giving without expectations, impact. And so, what tips would you give any young person that has gone through a tough situation or something like that, to kind of, let's say they're stuck in a rut or they're kind of just not feeling it right now? What advice would you give to them?
Yeah, that's a great question. Something that I talk about all the time, and I actually know to be true in my own experience and so many other experiences of people, like we all go through hard things, right? Mm-hmm. And resilience is the skill or the trait that we develop as a result of going through hard things. Resilience, I like to talk about, like, resilience is a skill that's being built or developed or cultivated, whether you know it or not. So if I continue to go through hard things and I'm still here to talk about it on the other side of those hard things, I'm developing resilience. Now, there are 2 different kinds of resilience. There's a positive resilience that is grit, that is this, I'm going to withstand hard things and become a better version of myself because of them. And then there's this negative type of resilience that no matter what, I'm going to push people away. I'm not going to let anyone in to help me. I'm not going to put my trust in other people. It's all me or nothing. And that kind of an approach that I lived by for most of my life. So what I would say for a kid or someone or a young person that's going through hard things is stop letting the hard things that you go through impact the decisions that you make. And so what I mean by that is when we're in high pressured situations, it's very unlikely that we're going to make smart and well thought out decisions. And I just know, like, there are people or things that could benefit. Let me speak in for myself. There were things that people were trying to do on my behalf or help me in certain situations that I turned them away because of
my whole life.
Yeah, right. Because I didn't want to let them in. And so,
God, it's like something came up inside me right there. Cause I'm like, oh,
absolutely.
That's my whole 20s. Yeah.
So like that resilience and you might be a great example of it. That resilience still on the positive end, that skill is still there. You're just able to use it in a much more effective and productive way. Whereas like on the negative side, it was allowing you to stay where you were and stay in what
because
you were
the scary thing is that you actually like the toxicity because
Yes.
It's all you know.
Absolutely. And so we can't say that better. So I would say any kid that's going through a hard thing that feels down is like, accept help. I would say just accept help. There was everything in me when like there's so many turning points in my own story, in my own like youth and background. But the most definitive and prominent one is when my coach stepped in, right? Everything in me wanted to reject every offer that he gave me. Mm-hmm. Like to a point where I tried to sneak out of school when it was over to avoid him. And I like found my way, like as soon as the bell rang, had all my stuff, dipped out, was literally about to like take off. And my coach is parked right in front of the school waiting at his car. And it was like, get in. And so like, if I wouldn't have accepted help in that moment, we would not be talking right now. Mm-hmm. I would not be the person I am right now. I would have made decisions that would have been quote unquote resilient, but would have led to negative outcomes. And so what I would say to them, to summarize it, is accept help. And that's it.
No, I couldn't agree more. It's one of those things where it's the actual problem is is pushing your ego aside and asking for help. And then through that, you'll realize that you'll turn around and help other people, and so on and so on. So
exactly.
Such a powerful story. I love it so much. If people want to find out about your speaking, your journey, how would they do that?
Yeah. So I have a website. It's GaelinSpeaks.com. So GAELIN, speak as in the verb, speaks.com. And then I'm on all social media platforms. I love to engage and connect with people there. You can Instagram, look me up. If you just search my name, it'll pop up. And then Facebook, Twitter is a little bit less professional than the other ones. That's my vice social media platform. So it's mostly sports and hot takes over there. So if that's up your alley, then find me on there too.
I love it, man. Such a powerful story. I really appreciate you sharing. I know people are going to get a ton of inspiration, and kind of anybody that's going through it. I think the theme for this is just accept help, ask for help. My favorite quote, Jim Rohn, you know what the top 1% does that other people don't? They ask. So just ask the universe what you want, and share this with somebody that we think could get some value from this. And we'll see you next time.
Awesome. Thanks, Austin.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Construct Your Life with Austin Linney. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to rate, review, subscribe, and pay it forward by sharing with a friend. Most importantly, take this opportunity to start constructing your life by taking immediate action on what you learned. For show notes, resources, and more information on one-on-one coaching with Austin, visit constructyourlifepodcast.com.